Hey guys, Shaun Nichols here, your friend in the real estate business. So I was thinking the other day, and I'm sure you know this, when it comes to buying or selling a home, there is a ton of paperwork. And from what I've seen, most people, buyers or sellers, when an agent or somebody puts a form in front of them, they just sign it. They have no idea what they're signing. So you could end up enlisted in the military that way. Trust me. I know. I've done it. No, but seriously. That's really dangerous, and I always encourage any of my buyers or sellers to read their paperwork. But it also has inspired me. I'm thinking about doing a quick video series on the most common forms used in a real estate transaction and kind of just explaining them and going over them with you so that you know what you're signing when your agent puts this form in front of you. So if that's something that you think's interesting or something I should keep doing, this is the first video in this series where I'm going to talk about the South Carolina disclosure of brokerage relationships. So if that's something you think's interesting, do me a favor and give this video a thumbs up. That way I know to keep making more. If not, maybe I won't if nobody finds it interesting. But I think it's a really valuable tool for anybody who's considering buying or selling a home in the near future, and especially for those of you who are going to be selling your home FSBO or for sale by owner. You're going to want to have these forms with you and understand what you're signing, definitely. Before I jump into this form, though, I do want to preface this by saying I am not a real estate attorney. Do not take any of this as legal advice, because that's not what this is. This is me simply explaining what the form says to you so that you know what's going on. So I'm going to go ahead and jump right into the video. This is the South Carolina disclosure of real estate and brokerage relationships. Every real estate agent in the South Carolina area has to provide you this form by law on their first substantial meeting with you, because it has to explain how they are going to treat you and what they are going to provide to you. So I'm going to jump right into this. This top portion here just says that, in other words, when you choose to work with any real estate licensee, your business relationship is legally with the brokerage firm and not with the associated licensee. So, for example, I work with eXp Realty. Yes, I'm an independent contractor, but any agreements that you sign with me are technically not between you and me. They're technically between you and eXp Realty. So that's something important to keep in mind. But I'm going to go ahead and scroll down here to customer versus client relationship. A lot of people don't really understand this. And I go ahead and say, if you haven't signed anything with an agent, then you're a customer. If you've signed an agreement with an agent, then you're a client. And there's really some big differences in this, and it's important for you to understand. So as a customer, a real estate agent owes you certain things. And I want to read these forms verbatim so that I'm not giving you legal advice here. But as you can see right here in the bolded section, unless you enter into a written agreement with a brokerage firm or agency representation, you are considered a customer of the brokerage firm. And that brokerage firm will not act as your agent. As a customer, you should not expect the brokerage firm or its licensees to promote your best interest. Now, this is a really big thing here, because when you go to a new home construction project and you meet the lady behind the desk, and she's very friendly, very helpful, she doesn't owe you to work in your best interest. She's working for the builder. When you talk to a listing agent who's representing a property about that property, they don't have to look out for your best interest. They're working for the seller. So any information that you provide them, they can tell the seller because they don't owe you any confidentiality. So something like, I've seen this happen where they said, you know, I want to submit an offer on this property at $210,000. But if the seller counters and comes back and says he wants it for $225,000, I'll accept that. Well, you just told the selling agent to go back to the seller and say, hey, you need to counter for $225,000 because we know the buyer is going to accept that. So that's really important. You have to be careful what you say to somebody if they are not representing your best interest. So that's the customer level relationship. Now, if you do sign a piece of paper, actually, let me jump back here. The things that an agent is required to provide to you as a customer is that, let me get into the bolded section here. They need to present all offers in a timely manner, account for any money or other property received on your behalf. They need to provide an explanation of the scope of their services that they're going to provide. So they need to tell you what they're going to do for you. They need to be fair and honest and provide accurate information, so they can't lie to you. They need to provide limited confidentiality. Like I said, they do have some confidentiality, but it's very limited. And then disclose any material adverse effects about the property or the transaction within the licensee knowledge. So if they know that the foundation has issues, they have to disclose that to you. But this is really, whenever you're meeting with an agent for the first time, this is kind of the level that you're at, and this is what you can expect from them. Now, the goal is for you to get to a client. For at least for the agent, the goal is for you to become a client, because they offer a higher level of service and they provide you a lot more privacy. So when a seller becomes a client of a real estate brokerage firm by signing a formal listing agreement with that brokerage for a seller to become a client, this agreement must be in writing, must clearly establish the terms of the agreement and the obligations of both the seller and the brokerage firm for which the agent becomes the agent for the seller. So at this point, you have a real estate agent, is basically what it's saying. It needs to be in writing. You need to know exactly what they're going to do for you, and it all needs to be written down and signed. And it's pretty much the same thing for a buyer client. For a firm to become a buyer client, this agreement must be in writing and clearly establish the terms of the agreement and obligations of both the buyer and the brokerage firm for which becomes the agent for the buyer. So that's basically, they owe you a lot more. And I'm going to scroll down here to the second page here, because it talks about client level duties. So these are things that are provided by the agent if you are a client. Obedience. They have to listen to what you say. If you say, I want my house listed at $200,000, not 190, they have to do that, or they can break the agreement. Loyalty. They have to be loyal to you. They have to disclose any information that they have. They owe you confidentiality. They owe you accounting, and they have to use reasonable skill and care in providing those services. So you really don't want to stay in that customer status very long. You would much rather become a client of an agent, because they owe you a lot more stuff and you get a lot more out of it. The other thing that is on this form talks about the difference between single agency, dual agency, disclosed dual agency, and designated agency. So I want to cover these real quick. So single agency is when a brokerage firm represents only one client in the same transaction, the seller or the buyer. It's called single agency. So what that means is I would represent you, or EXP represents you as the buyer. Then we go and buy a home that's listed for with an agent from Coldwell Banker, for example, right? So there's no connections involved there with Coldwell Banker. We're with EXP. It doesn't, there's no conflict of interest there. What dual agency means is when the brokerage represents two clients in one transaction, a seller and a buyer client. So, for example, let's say you're my seller and another agent from EXP Realty shows your property, and that EXP Realty agent makes an offer on that property. Well, now EXP represents both the seller and the buyer, and that we have to tell both seller and buyer about each other and say, hey, just so you know, we've got two different agents that are working this transaction underneath the same company, and you both have to be willing to agree that that is okay. It's the same thing as, for example, I've listed your property and I find the buyer. So now me as an agent, I am representing both the buyer and the seller. I owe both of you confidentiality. I owe both of you accounting. So you need to know that, because you need to know if there's a possible conflict of interest, right? And both the buyer and seller would have to agree on that. And that's what this disclosed dual agency is talking about. The buyer and seller have recognized conflicts of interest. Both clients' interests are represented by the brokerage firm as a disclosed dual agent. The brokerage firm and its associated licensees cannot advocate on the behalf of one client or the other. So if I'm working with both the buyer and the seller, I can't try to move the price higher or move the price lower for the other person, because then I would be doing at least one of my clients a disservice. Does that make sense? So that's basically what this is talking about. And then designated agency. So going back to, I'm representing both sides of the deal. I've got the buyer and the seller. If neither one of you feel like, hey, you know what, I don't like that, I don't want you to do that, we can do what's called designated agency, where either the buyer or the seller goes and works with another agent from EXP. So let's say you both disagree and neither one of you want me to represent both sides of the deal, then I would hand one of you over to another agent within my company so that they can negotiate for, let's say, the buyer, and I can negotiate for, let's say, the seller. And that would be how that works. So we kind of split that conflict of interest a little bit. So all of those decisions your agent has to tell you about. And what's crazy is this form, you have to sign this form. It's also in any of your agency contracts that you have to sign. And it's on any of the offer contracts or the contract to buy property contracts. So it's super important that any agent that you're talking to has covered this with you, because if not, they're in violation. And the bottom half here just says it's your choice. You know, as a real estate consumer in South Carolina, it is your choice what type of service you will receive. You can choose to remain a customer and represent yourself. You can go without a real estate agent, basically. You can choose to hire a brokerage firm and choose an agent to represent you. You can choose whether or not you want them to work only one side of the deal or two sides of the deal. I know I kind of mentioned it seems like it's a bad thing if an agent is representing both sides of the deal. But there are some things, if you tell your agent, no, I do not want you to represent both sides of the deal, that's really going to limit you, because what you've just said is, hey, Shaun, when I'm buying a house, I don't want you to show me any property that EXP has for sale. So you've just cut out, you know, a portion of the properties that you are eligible to buy. Same goes for a seller. If you say, hey, Shaun, I don't want you representing both sides of the deal, then you've just said, hey, don't bring me any buyers that you currently have waiting to buy properties, or any of the other agents that work in your office. Don't tell them about this property. Don't let them come by, because I'm not going to sell it to them. So that's something you have to keep in mind, is that you're limiting your exposure as a buyer and as a seller if you're not at least willing to consider designated or dual agency. And then the last one, so basically if you plan to become a client of a brokerage firm, the licensee will explain this agreement to you fully and answer questions you may have about the agreement. Remember, however, that until a representation agreement with the brokerage firm, you are considered a customer, and the brokerage firm cannot be your advocate, cannot advise you on price or terms, and only provide you with limited confidentiality. So this is one of the big forms that's used in every real estate transaction. Every agent that you meet with should be providing this information to you. If not, they're in violation, and that's a problem. So that's it. It's a really quick form. It's just those 2 pages. If you want a copy of this form that I can send over to you, all you got to do is send me a message here on Facebook. Give me like your email address to send it to, and I'll send you a blank copy of this form so that you can read it for yourself. Same with any of the other forms that I'm going to cover throughout this process. I just want to break down these big real estate forms so that you know what you're getting into and what you're signing. So that's all I have for you. If you find this content interesting, again, hit like on the video. If I should keep coming out with it, let me know in the comments below. I'd appreciate it. And then just to stay on top of the videos as they come out, jump over on my Facebook page, give it a like, and hit the following button so that you get notified every time these videos come out. If you have any questions between now and then, shoot me a message, and I'll look forward to working with you. Talk to you later. Bye-bye for now.